Did you know that the young Henry VIII, when he was a prince, Prince Henry, had a bit of an idol, a bit of a man crush, really? Well, he did. Henry idolised a young and dashing European ruler called Philip the Handsome, or Philip the Fair, a man Henry met in 1506 and who made a lasting impression on the 14-year-old prince. Let me tell you more. First, let me introduce you to Philip the Handsome. Philip was the son of Maximilian of Austria, who would later become Maximilian I, Holy Roman Emperor, and his wife Mary of Burgundy. Philip was born in June or July 1478, and so was 13 years Henry VIII senior. In 1482, when he was just 4 years old, Philip's mother died, and he inherited the Duchy of Burgundy, although his father acted as guardian of those territories until Philip was 15. In 1496, Maximilian negotiated the marriage of Philip to Juana, or Joanna, second daughter of Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabella I of Castile, and she was also the sister of Catherine of Aragon. Philip's sister, Margaret, was to marry Ferdinand and Isabella's only son, Juan, or John, Prince of Asturias. Juan died in 1497, and Juana's older sister Isabella died in 1498, and Isabella's son in 1500. So, in 1504, when Juana's mother died, Juana became Queen of Castile. However, Philip and his father-in-law signed a treaty in June 1506, and Philip was proclaimed King of Castile due to Juana being deemed unfit to rule due to her infirmities and sufferings. He was now Duke of Burgundy and King of Castile, a powerful man. However, Philip's rule was cut short by typhoid fever. He died on the 25th of September 1506 at the age of just 28. But what was Philip like? Well, as he was nicknamed Philip the Handsome or Philip the Fair, he was clearly known for his good looks. The Venetian ambassador described him as physically beautiful, vigorous and rich. King Louis XII of France, on seeing Philip, exclaimed, "What a handsome prince!" And Polydore Virgil said that he was of medium height, handsome of face and heavily built. He was talented, generous and gentlemanly. He was also athletic and a keen and skilled sportsman. He enjoyed handball and other sports, knightly pursuits and riding. So skilled a horseman was he that he could leap from one horse to another. Philip was also a patron of the arts, acting as patron to artists such as Dutch painter Hieronymus Bosch and scholars such as Erasmus, as well as talented composers and musicians. That's a very brief introduction to Philip. But let's move on to his impact on the young Henry VIII. Henry's older brother Arthur died in 1502, and Henry's life changed dramatically when he suddenly became heir to the throne. His father, Henry VII, became stricter with him and started grooming the young prince to become king. As David Starkey points out in his book Henry, Virtuous Prince, although the young prince's reading and his education would have presented him with many different styles of kingship, before 1506 he had seen only one contemporary monarch in action, his own father, Henry VII, who by this time was 49 years old, positively ancient in the 14-year-old prince's eyes. But then in 1506, fate brought a young, dynamic ruler to the English court, Philip. In that January, Philip and his wife Juana were on their way to Spain, sailing from the Netherlands when their fleet was caught in a storm in the English Channel. Philip and Juana's ship was driven to land at Melcombe Regis on the coast of Dorset. Sir Thomas Trenchard of Wolferton House in Dorset offered the couple shelter, with John Russell, later Earl of Bedford, attending on them. As Starkey explains, Philip and Juana weren't guests as such, they were hostages. Philip sent his secretary to Henry VII requesting an audience with the king, and it was arranged that the two rulers would meet at Windsor. Sir Thomas Brandon, Henry VII's Master of the Horse, escorted Philip to Windsor, stopping on the way at Richard Fox's Bishop's Palace at Winchester, where Henry VII and his heir, Prince Henry, greeted Philip before they all moved on to Windsor. Philip ended up staying at the English court for 6 weeks, and during that time he was made a Knight of the Garter, while Prince Henry was made a Knight of the Golden Fleece. And the two kings negotiated a commercial treaty which removed all duties from English textile exports. But it was also a time of pageantry, banqueting, hunting and hawking, and sport. At one point, while the two kings were watching a game of tennis, Philip suddenly got up, stripped off his heavy outer clothing, and played against the Marquis of Dorset. This dynamic 27-year-old must have been quite a contrast to the ageing Henry VII, and Prince Henry obviously admired Philip, and the two got on very well during Philip's visit. Not long after Philip had left the English court, the prince wrote to him asking Philip to apprise me from time to time and let me know of your good health, so to keep in touch. Sadly, Philip died just a few months later. Erasmus wrote to Prince Henry offering his condolences on the news of Philip's death, and the prince replied saying, "For never since the death of my dearest mother hath there come to me more hateful intelligence." He was obviously grief-stricken by the death of this man who'd offered him another model of kingship, one which was preferable to that of his father. It was after that, as Starkey points out, and I'd highly recommend his book, that Henry threw himself into sport, particularly jousting, or rather running at the ring, as full jousting was seen as far too dangerous for the heir to the throne. I'm sure he wanted to emulate his idol, and he did within limits. I do think that Philip was a huge role model for the young Henry VIII. He showed the prince that you could be a ruler and be sporty and fun. And we see that in Henry VIII in his early reign. He left the boring stuff to people like Cardinal Wolsey and enjoyed all the perks of kingship. He jousted, he played other sports and games, hunted and hawked, enjoyed banqueting and pageantry. He lived the good life while also being a patron of the arts, a Renaissance prince. Perhaps the two men also have something not so good in common, something more dark: their ill treatment of the women in their lives. In her book, The Monstrous Regiment of Women Female Rulers in Early Modern Europe, Sharon Jensen writes that in some accounts, Philip is depicted as a kind of sexual psychopath, a ruthless sadist who held Juana in a vicious cycle of affection, abuse, and intimidation from which she was constitutionally unable to escape. While Juana is portrayed as a woman so madly in love that she allowed herself to be psychologically abused, unable to free herself from her husband's domination and sexual magnetism. And Juana was kept in confinement in the Low Countries for a time, and, of course, deprived of her crown. And when Henry VIII decided to cast Juana's sister, Catherine of Aragon, aside, he banished her from court and demoted her from Queen to Dowager Princess of Wales. Catherine's final years were ones of uncertainty, separation from her daughter, and suffering. It's an interesting comparison, I think. So there you go. The young Henry VIII, or Prince Henry, was wowed by the dynamic Philip the Handsome. How much of an influence do you think that this European ruler had on the prince? Please do share your thoughts and opinions. I'd love to know. I'll see you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.